Welcome back to the weekly Flagship Celtic here podcast. It's Declan joined by Quinny. Double trouble. Celtic have just played their first match in the Sydney Super Cup after recording this. We did think about going live, but we thought we'd just hang off, as I know some people might not be catching us live. So to you Spotify listeners and whatnot, we're here pre-recorded just after the Sydney Super Cup. Quidditch finished 2-1 to Sydney FC. They gave a pretty good account of themselves in the game. I know you didn't get the chance to watch the full game there. I just kind of had a run through it there before we came on. Sydney, for the most part of that game, gave a pretty good account of themselves in terms of a team. I know you can't read too much into friendlies, but for probably all those people that sniggered at Ange Postecoglou coming to Scottish football, I don't mean Celtic fans, but possibly people in the press. From what I watched there, and I know you're a person that watches different leagues around the world, standard Estonian football's pretty decent.
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me to see the result in actual fact because of the time of the year and everything as well, because over that part of the world, the calendar's completely upside down to what we've got over here, and this was maybe not quite like a charity shield kind of vibe for them, but there's definitely like for them being the host and for the standing of where Australian football is versus, us and all the other guests, it is like, they want to do well, they want to try hard, and they want to say, they want us to come on here and say the things that you're saying. It's like, wow, I didn't expect that, or whatever. But yeah, Asian football in general is like at the very top end, like Sydney and some of the better teams that would qualify for the continental stuff. They've got internationals, of a standard, amongst our squad. So interesting to see the result as it came in. The only name that's familiar to me is the boy Bratan that played defensive midfield. Where do I know his name from? Melbourne City, the Man City.
Is that possibly?
Team.
Right, okay, there's a boy in the team that used to play for Ferencváros, so I wasn't sure if that was him. But Robert Mack in the team too. I think he capped over 30 times for Slovakia. So
yeah, I remember him too. He used to play for Zenit.
There's a few from him. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah,
that's him. So there's a decent mix in there, and even kind of, I think some people will be looking at the attendance. I think the Allianz Stadium over there holds something around 42,000. The estimated crowd, I've not seen any confirmation on it, was about 20,000, which isn't bad for a friendly at all. And in Sydney recently, if anybody's maybe looking at their attendances, I think last season it was about 6,500, but that was due to the Allianz Stadium being built and they were playing, I think, at a kind of rugby type stadium. Sure. I'd been told by somebody I know over in Oz. So, but listen, 20,000 turning out for a friendly is a good thing. And the rumour is for the game on Sunday, Quinn, against Everton, that they've sold 45,000 tickets, which is quite incredible.
Nice. Good for
them. But that's
man.
Quite incredible, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. And, we were talking just before coming on, like Celtic used to do these kind of trips pre-season, like all the time, back in the day. And eventually I got to the point where we were all sick of it because it was like we were doing all this crazy traveling and then coming back to do 3 rounds of qualifying and stuff like that. And it was just pre-season was just always an absolute riot. But we've fitted in that nice little pattern of going to Austria and going to these little camps and really preparing for qualifiers and for the season because qualifications meant so much. And, seeing us back out there again, going out and meeting Celtic fans from around the world and giving other people the opportunity to see us, locally, 20,000, I think is a great turnout, for Sydney because like football's nowhere. Is it even in their top 3 domestic sports?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
So like it's not as if it's the cricket or the rugby or the Aussie rules or anything like that, so I think that's really good going. And for us, like looking at the team, as soon as the team came out, I was really excited to see how we got on in this game because it was a real second stringer that went out for the first half, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because this is valuable minutes for guys that we've seen today that I'm really interested to hear how you reckon they got on, in particular Abelgard and Adeguchi in midfield.
Yeah, it was quite interesting with those two, starting the game because I think anybody would probably have expected one of them to start and then maybe play kind of 2 more advanced, what you could call maybe attacking midfielders, but both seem to kind of rotate at times into that kind of deeper line role in midfield between Abelgard and Yusuke Adeguchi. I would say Abelgard looked the better of the two. He's a player who I think, I was writing an article the other day, so I know this off the top of my head. I think he's made 9 appearances for Celtic so far this season, but they've all been off the bench. And in terms of minutes, there's not much to kind of lay claim to. And Quinny, probably a lot of people would have thought that when Callum McGregor dropped out the team after that knee injury against Leipzig, it would have possibly been Abelgard who then came in and replaced him. Obviously, we've seen Matt O'Reilly come into the team to be that person. But Abelgard set out the two of them. Yusuke Deguchi was the one that I was really, really surprised to see. We'd obviously on Seltzer here, we've got the podcast with Dan Orlowitz, who's out there at the Japan Times. We spoke about those signings that Celtic made last January. Reo Hitati, Daiza Maeda, and Yusuke Deguchi. And he said out the three, he is the one. Deguchi was the one he had reservations about, and he's the one that he's least surprised maybe hasn't worked out. Obviously, he's been in British football before at Leeds United. It's not quite worked out. And, here he comes into the team, obviously left out the Champions League squad too, after picking up another injury in pre-season. It was his first minutes since pre-season for Celtic. I really don't know possibly where it goes for Deguchi with this. Interested to see Robertson come back into the fold. We'll get onto that kind of those B teams and younger player aspect. But I thought Abelgard looked okay, but came off after the first half. Celtic's quality improved in the second half due to the subs made. Reo Hitati, Matt O'Reilly came on, Jota, Haksabanovic, etc., which we'll talk about. But interested to see both those guys in the same side. I think it was just one of those ones, Quinny, that the manager was just trying to get minutes into two guys' legs that were really needing it, alongside David Turnbull, who's obviously trying to build his minutes back up.
Interesting. So Deguchi didn't really do much then to impress, or nothing distinctive?
I wouldn't say. I mean, for me, the first half is very, very open. And again, I think it's important that in a friendly like this, you're not going down to Blackburn or Sunderland or wherever. You're travelling halfway across the world. So I think jet lag, needs to come into it. I think Stephen Wells certainly maybe felt the effects of jet lag at the Robert Mack equaliser, because he's just nowhere absolutely need him. So I think that needs to come in as a factor to players' performance. Certainly in the first half, we didn't really look like ourselves, as I say, and the subs were made much more like ourselves. But yeah, I don't think Yusuke Deguchi really stood out for me. He had a couple of efforts from long range and he just blazed them over the crossbar. It was as if he was trying to impress maybe a bit too much. Abelgard looked a lot cooler in the ball and maybe just that wee bit more significant in that first half.
Interesting. And again, looking at the team, the way it went, you just referenced it there. The cavalry comes on. Haksabanovic, Jota.
Yep. Taylor's another one who I even thought kind of improved their balance of play, because we get the goal from Alexandro Bernabe's strike. We know he liked that when he was in Argentina, taking that shot from the edge of the box. 9 times out of 10 they went into the back of the net. But yet to see him score his first Celtic goal, but it comes from, I think the shot's going wide. Kuhl gets a touch on it. He knows exactly what he's doing. But yeah, at times, again, our system, I think, is very set, with that inverted fullback role that Ralston was particularly doing well. But Bernabe at times just still that wee bit of erraticness in his game that, he maybe just abandons it and he's away up and he's on that left wing, which is great if you're watching it from a fan's perspective. But Ange Postecoglou's probably tearing his hair out.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. But again, when you hear Ange talk about different players and stuff like that, he does say that he wants their individuality to come into the team, So maybe there's a wee bit of sometimes when he maybe accepts it's one of those things you get with him where he is going to go and do that, and there's pros and cons of that, and it's about picking the time for him to get the minutes, and he is going to learn and develop, of course, So it's an interesting to hear you say that as well.
But that's it. He's still a raw talent, is it? And
Totally.
he's not really. I think he's been a hard player to judge, Alexandro Bernabe, because Greg Taylor's nailed down as your first choice, but when he comes in and rotates with Tony Ralston, there is a balance to their play at times, because as I say, Ralston plays that inverted role so well, and I think Bernabe's still adapting to that. But he's improved the squad, no doubt about it, because last season we just didn't have that rotation at left back, and you'd Liam Scales playing there quite a lot, who looks now to likely be a centre back with the base playing at Aberdeen. Yeah.
And, again, looking at, you're talking about raw talents, Bosan Lawal getting minutes, Rocco Vata getting minutes, how did they do against the Australians for you?
Again, I mean, Rocco Vata for the B team, he's got a good record. It's 8 goals and 14 appearances. Again, these stats are flying off me this morning. Been writing articles and been paying attention. So Lowland League wise, really, really impressive, Rocco Vata. He usually plays that kind of number 10 role, attacking midfielder on the right hand side. Interesting, he came on through the middle, which is probably more to do with Georgios Giacomakis, disappearing. I don't really know where he is. He definitely travelled to Australia, but
Oh, really?
not in the bench. So hopefully no issue with him. I've not seen anything come out from the manager, the updates and that one, so hopefully he's okay. But he came on up top. Rocco Vata looked absolutely fine. Again, Scott Robertson, I think, is probably the most interesting one because we've seen him make that competitive debut for the first team domestically and Europa League. Actually, saw it was against Cluj, if you remember back then.
Mm-hmm.
He's had that loan spell down at Crewe, and was it Gillingham he was at before that? He impressed down there. The season's cut short due to injury last year. Comes back up the road, and he's fairly into that bracket, Scott Robertson, through no fault of his own. He's still in and around the club, obviously part of the UEFA Youth League team, but he's not able to play in the Lowland League team due to his age. So it's almost as if he's kind of in that middle bit. So it'll be interesting if Ange Postecoglou has plans for him in the second part of the season. But again, it's if you're looking, we're talking earlier about Yusuke Hidiguchi, former Japan international and whatnot. He's nowhere near the first team. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What would your perspective be at where maybe Robertson ranks compared to Hidiguchi and maybe even an Applegard?
Well, I think the whole point, I think because Ideguchi was like signing, I know he didn't come into like the January or whatever, but in terms of like Ange action signings, he must have been like the second or third name that was across the line or something.
Yep.
And at that point for the manager, he's coming into this club, which is also brand new, and he's guaranteed, in his opinion, like, oh, this guy will come in and do a job. So I think that's been the initial role of Ideguchi. Now, obviously, none of that has came to pass because of his injury record primarily. But I think now the manager isn't in a situation where he needs a safe transfer to someone cheap that as long as he plays, I know this guy can deliver a 6 out of 10 or whatever. Because listening to you talk to now, I think the guy's had plenty of run up, and if he's not, and I know the first half might have been a bit frantic. We'll see what else he does in these matches, I suppose, if he gets minutes again. But if he's not demonstrating in this match like some sort of significance into the team or an ability to enhance us in some way, when he gets the chance, like we're talking about with Bernabe, what does he bring to this system to give himself a style, to give himself an edge in this team? Then I'm not sure he has a future, so maybe the door does open then for the Robertsons and whatever to then be that bottom layer of the squad.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, as I say, he's just through no fault of his own, probably just at the situation that he's, ended up arriving to, Scott Robertson, having got those loan spells down south and impressed, and obviously if you're looking at somebody that's did that and came back with a real success of Celtic, it's Callum McGregor, much in the same boat, doesn't break into the Celtic first team, 18, 19, it takes a wee while until he actually gets that chance in the team, and it possibly means that I find it interesting because obviously we brought Abelgard in so late in the window, and that indicated to me, Quinny, there maybe wasn't too much confidence in Hidiguchi, and I expected Robertson to leave at the time. I know that Celtic were open to him leaving, but he's 21, so he's not. His chance hasn't went at Celtic. There's still a chance he could be featured in the team, and Bosun Lawal as well as another player who regularly trains with the first team. He's a big unit. We paid, I think, decent money for him. It was a few 100,000 when we brought him up.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, and I think he regularly plays for the Ireland in the 21s too. So there's still these competitions are a good chance. I was talking about Ben Doak the other day, and talking about probably the standard that players get. Yeah, wow is I think the reaction most people get with Ben Doak. Obviously, just signed that professional contract with Liverpool, and we were talking about the standard that some of the players in Celtic's B team and whatnot are playing against in the Lowland League. And any Lowland League supporters will say, well, Celtic's yet to win the Lowland League, so you can't really discredit the quality that's in the league. But if you're looking at what Doak's going down to play against compared to what some of the players up here are up against, and then that step up, you see Celtic in that UEFA Youth League didn't make an impact at all. We got a great victory over in Germany against Leipzig, but that was it. We just look, so far away for that kind of elite level. Maybe a club of Celtic standing might never get to that level with youth football, but you certainly want to be bringing players through. But again, with Ben Doak last year, in the middle of a title race, it probably wasn't the time to be able to bring him into the team, and that's been the case for these guys that we're talking about just now, Vata, Robertson, Labo. When would they get a chance to actually come into the team? Because if you put one of them in and you don't get a good result, questions are then asked to the manager. And when you've got players, it's easy to forget how young a bad is. If you're looking just at Rocco Vata, for instance, who's the next big kind of touted talent at Celtic, I think for a lot of these guys, it's all about timing. But would you subscribe and agree to that, Quinny?
Yeah, I think timing's it's always important in a young player's career because we've seen it so often, that sliding door situation of the guy makes a transfer for money and it doesn't pan out, and there's a good few examples in Celtic's history of that, never mind across the world, But talking about Scott Robertson there, is your kind of discussing him there and some of these other guys we're talking about. I think the boy Robertson, like, his loan career is like quite solid, but what he could do with is a loan like Mikey Johnson, go to Belgium, go to Portugal, go and do something like that, and that's probably because again, like, let's even say Adiguchi does get moved out, maybe let's say even James McCarthy gets moved out, he's still going to be behind like five guys, there's still Aaron Moy, there's still a fit McGregor, there's still Abelgard, Hatate, O'Reilly, Turnbull, so, he's how close can he really get at the moment unless transfers happen in his favour? So he can't waste it too much more time at us this season. So I'd like to see, a guy like him who we still have kept around, for this length of time, get that kind of Mikey Johnson treatment, as it were. Let's get him out to somewhere a bit more exotic and try and get him to actually develop.
Yeah, that might be the chance in the January window. And even if it is a Scottish-based team, if it's a team like Hibs or whatnot for Scott Robertson, it might do him the world of good. But I think, as you say, Quinny, there could be a lot of lessons learned from Mikey Johnson that if you go to a team, whether it be Portugal or, Belgium, I know that's been the case for a few other guys, and you're playing in a similar sort of rhythm to the way Celtic will play, you're on the attack, you're trying to win games, it's much better than going to a Ross County or a Kilmarnock when you're going to be under the cosh for a lot of the time and not really. You'll improve one part of your game, but it won't be a side of your game that you'll probably need far too often at Celtic. I'm just looking here, last season at Crewe, Scott Robertson, 24 appearances, and that was halfway through the season. So it was heading towards, a good number of appearances down there. That was him stopping playing in February. His final game in the league was against Accrington Stanley on the 12th of February. So he was heading for well over 30 appearances for Crewe down there and was constantly making an impact. And as I say, Callum McGregor didn't break into the Celtic first team too early on. If there's possibility, I know James McCarthy's got an injury just now. As you say, if he possibly moves out the door, possibly the Gucci, there could be a chance for Robertson, but still it'll be behind others, won't he?
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But again, like we've said, with Forrest, with Johnson, and I guess we could maybe even begin to throw Robertson into this category, that, Celtic are always going to be doing well to keep these guys close by, for whenever the time comes, because, players will always come and go from Celtic. And like the value Forrest has given us this year, like if you've got, and we've had guys over the years that have been in that mode, like Lustig was a great servant in that respect. It really didn't matter who the hell was the manager or what style we were playing. He'd been there for so long. He was plugging and playing, even though he was always a dominant kind of player in the squad. But there's always other guys that are floating around. I remember even Samaras coming in and out the team on different managers and some of these other players, So it's always wise, I think, to keep an eye on these ones that we're bringing through, because there's not always that financial need to sell them on. They're not necessarily always on big wages. You've really got number one, a duty of care to them in their career to look after them the best way you can, and try and develop them. And then number two, it is like maximizing it for the club. And if that is like, if it is selling them at some point, cool. But is it also that, do you know what, when you're not out on loan, you can play 4 or 5 games a year, 3 of them are in the cup, 2 of them are in the league or whatever. And then you develop, you get to, Callum McGregor's age and then, beyond, and then you're settling into the team and you're becoming a mainstay. Because not many players, when they're young, like, we hear all these stories and all the time about Celtic let this guy go and then he went when he was 14, like Andy Robertson or whatever. We hear all these things. And so often when players get cut, they don't come back until much later in their career. So some of these guys that you are on the fence with as a club, it does make sense to sometimes keep a few of them a bit close by in the off chance that you don't get that headline of, oh, you cut him when he was 12 and now he's the best left back in the world.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And hopefully, I was going to say hopefully that's not the case with Ben Doak, but from what I've watched and the snippets I've watched, it's not that we've cut him. I don't think Celtic could have did too
No, that's
much,
a
as I
bit
say,
different.
to hold on to him. But I think he's going to be a top player down there, whether it's at Liverpool or elsewhere. I think he will be a good player. But it's all about creating that pathway. I know the manager said on Saturday they're taking Ben Summers over as well, but he's got an injury at this moment in time. So it's
But
about
see,
creating
even with
that.
that, see what you're
Yeah.
saying with Ben Doak and that atmosphere, like that Category 1 elite Premier League youth stuff that they do, that's like American, like sport, like college sport level, investment that goes into that, time, money. All these kids, obviously Doak is from up here and he's down playing at Liverpool, and their reach stretches even further beyond these shores, of course,
Mm-hmm.
But it is like the absolute pinnacle elite of players in their position, in their age group, that they can actually put together. And we are never really going to be able to offer that in Scottish football, because like we're just not going to have like 20 teams that have that amount of investment. So
and people talk about, it was a tongue-in-cheek tweet from somebody, but it was when they were talking about Doak, left playing against universities and plumbers to go down to England and play in the Premier League too. But that's the reality of the Lowland League. That there's very little money on it. A lot of the guys that apply their trade in there, who are honest, genuine, professionals, are also out doing a day job to pay the bills, and they're not in the position that you say, Quinny, that's getting money pumped into it, like the leagues down there do. But it's about creating the pathway, and possibly, as you say, the cup competitions are the way to do that. And a guy like Rocco Vata, who looks like a talent, he's 17 years of age, it's very, very difficult, because at this point in
squad
time,
number
if you're looking,
69.
and if you're looking through those, come on, it's early in the morning. If you're looking through those Celtic forwards, where does he get the chance? Where does he fit in? That's the biggest question, And if you're coming back after the break, you're about to Pataudry, nobody would probably be starting Rocco Vata there, but maybe it's looking at a game like, Livingston on the Wednesday night. Can he be in the bench, and can he maybe come on for 10 minutes and then build it up from there onwards? There needs to be a pathway for these players. I would have a hope and confidence with Ange Postecoglou and around the club that he will always try and look to bring in youth talent, because guys like Ralston, Forrest, McGregor are all shown to him, and even Stephen Welsh, that, young players coming through the academy can be trusted and can step up to the mark for the first team.
Yeah, and I think Ralston's actually a great example of this as well, because like obviously Ralston's kicked on a lot in the last year and a bit under Postecoglou, right? But part of the reason we're all really familiar with Ralston is because he was given his chance when he was really young. He made an absolute fool of himself against Neymar, when we get pumped, and he was giving it the big one to him. And he managed to redeem himself because we kept him around he maybe just done it in the nick of time before he get cut, if you know what I mean. But talking about Scott Robertson, he'd probably tread that path a bit closer of like, your time will come if you hang about long enough and you're good enough, kind of thing. But I think like, that Premier League 2 stuff as well, like it's obviously it's not the same like kind of blood and snotters and grit that you get playing, the kind of standard of football we're talking about up this end for that level. But what it is like absolute pinnacle peak of, as I said, those age groups. And the only way we can really combat that is kind of like what we've did, maybe too late with Mikey because he's like 23 or whatever now at this point. But these kind of loans, that Urigides, we've put him out on loan again to Belgium. And I think there's a lot of clubs that do that, and there's a lot of clubs that get these official kind of links. And it's Man City, Red Bull, they're the best at it because they buy teams, but many other clubs do it without purchasing one another. But if we can get into a good rhythm of like having great facilities for access, and like, because some of these countries produce fantastic talent, and there's nothing really stopping Celtic, if they were ambitious enough, to go and approach a team in Belgium, Portugal, Croatia, would be my 3 number 1 picks, in the middle of the table, and just say, listen, we want to send you 2 guys a year. Is that all right? And like, you'll play them. Aye, no bother. And then, to the best of your ability, you can orchestrate something like that, of course. And that's part of the way then when we're coming into Europe, some of the stuff we've been talking about in this podcast throughout the season, you're used to playing against different opposition, guys that maybe cheat the rules a bit or dive a bit or play some of this game or that kind of thing. And then you're producing a different type of, youth player as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got that experience maybe playing against, a couple of top teams, and obviously Moritz Jens different category to that, but his time at Lorient, he'd been up against PSG, Monaco, Lyon, whoever else, and had played against, Messi, Neymar, and whatever. And he'd gained that experience before.
After that
And
Premier
could,
League too.
yeah, and played in that too. Yes, good point. Matt O'Reilly's another one in there who has that experience. But yeah, I mean, especially when you're looking at the structure of the club at this point in time, Quinny, because you've got Mark Lawwell in there, who is a prodigy, top man, City Group person, who will have contacts at all those different clubs. And, maybe a Girona doesn't want a couple of boys for Celtic. That's absolutely fine with the league that they're competing in. But maybe some of the other clubs, even if it is, to Melbourne or wherever else, might be worth just taking a punt on some of them. And a person who I'm looking forward to coming back to Celtic, and I think we'll get a chance when he comes back out the City Group equation, is Adam Montgomery. And it's even quite interesting to look at him and seeing how can you use your loan players to impact your position in the league. Because as Montgomery out at St Johnstone plays a blinder against Celtic's challengers in the league, and it's worth him going out there for that experience, and he's given us something back in our current position. So there's that. But would you agree in that? You're talking about approaching teams in different countries. Surely, if that's the kind of system at Celtic we're looking at, Mark Lowe was the very type of man that you would want in there to do that with the amount of City Group teams that they've got.
Yeah, you would definitely think so. I guess Celtic's big enough that we could probably start to make our own network of people that are probably quite like even St Pauli. St Pauli's a team they've got one of our ex-players at the moment as captain, Jackson Irving. So he was making headlines on the internet.
The cool Jackson Irving.
Yeah,
belted at top that.
Aye, absolute belter. Viduka and everything as well. Absolutely nailed it. So yeah, there's plenty of a network that we could have access to already anyway. And as I say, it is just the future of, like, I think for clubs like ourselves that unfortunately, as I say, you're not going to get 20 institutions around us that could put the same level of investment we could into to then create this kind of elite sphere of production for youth players that are brought in and developed locally. So then it's like, well, for the ones that you either have a lot of faith in that you want to just like, you're maybe Rocco Vata, right? 16, 17 years old. You're coming through the ranks. You're looking like a really great forward. But again, there's like two guys in front of you. Maybe we sign somebody in January. So why don't we send you out to the second division in Belgium? Or why don't we send you out to the top division in Croatia? Go play there for 6 months, score a few goals and all the rest of it, And then when somebody's sold on, Giacomakis is like 27 or whatever, he's not going to be here forever. Same with Kyogo, maybe a few others. Then you're 20 now, Rocco Vata, and you've played, in two divisions across Europe, made about 20 appearances, scored a couple of goals, whatever you've done. And then when you're coming back to us and you're ready to kick on, like remember Christopher Ayer going Kilmarnock's a bit more local again, but that kind of idea, you come back and you're battle hardened, you're ready, and it's not like you're coming off our bench or our B team to add to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. You're getting that rhythm of games that players at that age need to develop. It's all very well. I think that's been some of the not criticism, but some of the questions possibly asked around the guy like Stephen Welsh, who is happy to be a squad player, but at his age probably needs more game time than he's already getting, and it's absolutely fine. Stephen wanting to hang about the place, he comes in, he does the job whenever he's asked, plays for us today, but probably at his age to properly develop and fulfil his potential, he probably needs a wee bit more game time than he's already getting, and that's when the balance maybe needs to come. When that was the coffee away there, that's when the balance needs to come. That you're looking at it, and but we're looking at Yuki Kobayashi. Is that then the possibility that he can come in, youngster, fit into the team, and that maybe lets Welsh go and have that bit of time out and loan to build up the game time? I don't know. Does it mean that one comes in, one goes out? I don't know again. But it's really interesting. And when we're in that subject to kind of the B team and players coming in, Scott Robertson's contract's he's out of contract next summer. What do you do with that one at this point in time? Because surely if he's going to be offered a new contract, you're going to need to see him break into the team. But for me, Quinny, he's just not going to get those minutes.
I think if the club has faith in him, they button his contract up kind of the now and then agree a loan with him somewhere, to finish the season out and then and then say we revisit it in the summer. I think that's what they would do, But if there's no appetite for it, then I don't think you'll see or hear anything from it, and he'll just be released on a free and he could end up anywhere. What I was also going to say on this note is we've seen a lot of Scottish success recently in Italy over the last couple of months, with a few players going over there and doing pretty well, you know. And we're not talking about the biggest and best teams, but it is ambitious teams, and they're coming to Scotland and they're getting players that hit good stats, good raw KPIs that they can get on a budget.
Well, Bologna's leading the way with that, with Hickey and Ferguson, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed. And the boy went to Verona from Hibs. I forget his name. Doig, is it?
Doig went to Verona. Yep.
Yeah,
Josh Doig. And obviously Liam Henderson's over there too.
And we Hendo over at Empoli still running the show.
Yep.
And he's been over there for like 3 or 4 years, been promoted and relegated. And if you watch him now, I seen him at the beginning of this season play a match. He looks, see even his haircut and everything, like he looks like a Serie A midfielder. There's no two ways about it. He's proper acclimatized. He's really of the level, and he's like the main kind of McGregor in the team, moves the ball left to right and whatever. So yeah, like, you know, it's not like we can't perform at this level, but when you see Lewis Ferguson going over there, that's opportunity. That's someone who's just taken an opportunity and grasped it with both hands. And with players that are developing, that's all they want is an opportunity. And your opportunity at Celtic might be in 3 years, you'll be a first team player, but for the next year or two, if that's what your ambition is, then you need to go be a first team player over here somewhere else, or you need to be better. That's just the standard we've got here.
Yeah, and it's about having that plan, pathway, and whatever else in place. Those are really good examples to look at. Liam Henderson was always a player I quite liked at Celtic, but didn't work out. And as you say, he's went over there and he's running the show at Empoli. So, you know, fair play to him for doing that. You say he's acclimatised. I think he speaks Italian now perfectly too. Yeah. So, you know, absolutely hats off to him. But hopefully not too much an attraction to lead players away for Celtic permanently. If it's just for loan deals, I'll be quite happy.
Yeah.
But you know, while we're talking about networks and whatnot, Quinny, you know, going over to Australia, just looking at the trip itself, you know, I think mainly, you know, great for Ange Postecoglou to go back to his homeland, everything around that. He's been inducted into the Football Australia Hall of Fame. Congratulations to him for that. He's done so much for the country in terms of football, you know, having won titles at South Melbourne and Brisbane Roar, I think it was, won the Asian Cup as Socceroos manager. He's done a lot there. I think he still wants to do a lot more in his career. Hopefully that means a hell of a lot more trophies at Celtic. But the whole trip itself, you mentioned we used to do this. I remember us going over and playing in the USA against Real Madrid, if you remember the game. Yeah. I think we played in I don't know if it was Candlestick Park, but we definitely played in a baseball ground over in the US too. It might have been that game. Actually, it wasn't, but we played over in Candlestick, I'm sure. And we've previously been to Australia. Whether there's any trips to Japan possibly in the horizon for the summer could be interesting. But in terms of, you know, the modern game, Quinny, you say that we've got into this rhythm. I go into Austria, which has been clear since Brendan Rodgers came in. That's been the pattern that Celtic's followed, is going over there, playing your Sturmsgrats and whatever else, couple of games, and that's you. You come play a couple of games at Celtic Park and you're ready. But in terms of growing the brand, which is a lot of modern football's actually about, these trips are really where you can start to shine in terms of growing what the football club's about. And Australia is the perfect example that it really was an untapped market from Celtic's perspective before Ange Postecoglou arrived. Obviously, Tom Roderick in the team for a long time. We've had players like Scott McDonald, Mark Viduka, what else, etc. But we know there's a big Celtic support there. Do you see that with the people turning out? There was a bus running from Western Australia to Sydney. I don't know if you've seen that tweet. 40 odd hours.
I've seen the red line.
Yeah, mental. Absolutely mental. So there's people desperate to see their team. The folk yesterday getting to that open training session, getting to meet Ange, Carrie Cool, Jota, absolutely fantastic for them. And that's, for me, stuff that we should be looking at doing a lot more often and having a presence in these countries. You know, I think about Osway, Scott McDonald's over there coaching, Paul McStay obviously lives over there in Lisbon Line, Willie Wallace has lived over there for the past 40 years. Having a kind of, you know, global ambassador program or whatever you want to call it, and have guys that are present and do things for the club there, whether it's Oz, Ireland, America, or wherever, you know, grow the brand and let it excel. And, you know, with that will come more riches that you can spend then on your team in the park, and it even feeds back to that youth level stuff that we're talking about. If you start to create better connections in these countries, one, you'll have a better place to shop in the transfer market, and two, you'll have places where players that we've talked about can maybe go and apply their trade, because that's modern football, and it's something that Celtic probably lack a bit too much, is expanding enough.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all pre-existing stuff. America, Australia, there's a lot of expats and stuff there. Never mind the players that we've had to play for us, for any just general, football fans from these places. But yeah, I think there's a fine line to be tread with the glamour friendlies as well, because if you remember, I think it was called like the Atlantic Cup or something. I think they done it like 2 or 3 years on the spin. Or I may be remembering some of this wrong, but I think I'm not too far away from it. And it did, sometimes I think it did get in the way when we had qualifiers. So it is really quite situational. Like, this one's lovely because it's an international break. The majority of the squad aren't going away. And, some guys needed the minutes. The first half, Adeguchi, Abelgard, even Bernabe, Welsh, Siegrist, they get, he played the whole game. They get good minutes in them. And it's a multifaceted thing. The players on the pitch benefit from it. The supporters benefit from it. The club benefits from it, etc., etc. But it did get to the point where it was like the players were suffering. Nobody, maybe local fans would go to, but I seen tons of people leaving Glasgow like last week for this, like and stuff like that, and making a holiday of it. Which maybe people did for America. I'm maybe not old enough to really remember that, but I think you understand. Like before, it didn't quite have that compounding positive effect that this trip's had. It was like just the money and turning up and playing Real Madrid, and then right, let's fly home quickly. We've got to play Rosenborg tomorrow, and then, or whatever it might have been, And everybody was just like, why are you doing this? You're just making things even harder. And then transfers weren't getting done because the manager's out the country, or time zones are different, and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely think they're of great value, but with Celtic's history of them, I just wouldn't want us to get too carried away with them, especially if we do have qualifiers to face ever again in the future, which we hope
Yeah, and obviously, you talk about treading that fine line. It wasn't too long ago that there was a possibility of playing a Glasgow Derby game, and it was until the support act decided to pull out with it. So it's absolutely fine.
Imagine they did go. That would have sold out that place. No two ways
Well,
about it.
It probably would have, because obviously I think there's some sort of Rangers support, and it was obviously due to the connection of past players and whatever else.
But think about it. See if River Plate and Boca Juniors were going to play in Hampden. Do you think there'd be a ticket?
I would go. Well, I would try and go at the game, but it probably wouldn't be a ticket. No.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But the same kind of thing. You just got
still. Aye, but I think trading that fine line is right, and it's actually quite funny to think about that. I mean, obviously, we're saying if buts and maybes, but can you imagine had we arrived at the situation where Celtic were 9 points ahead in the league? We already know that the manager on the other side of the water's under pressure just now. And imagine you were playing them on Sunday at the Accor Stadium and possibly 80,000 people. That would have been absolutely mental. But we wouldn't dwell on that. Man. It's just quite crazy to think about, though, isn't it?
Imagine they were still on for doing that trip, man. It would be so funny. They must be so happy that they get to go home and hide.
Well, they're on holiday just now, so.
It was like literally after the last game, it was like, oh, Van Bronckhorst is back in Holland. It's like, well, that was quick.
Looking at some training images yesterday, I think it was a real welcome sight to see Callum McGregor back in, leading the line training again. And
yes, it was.
It's kind of crazy, Quinny, to think about, how many games we've been without him, because last season, I don't think you could have ever envisaged Celtic team without Callum McGregor, could you have?
No, we couldn't have. And I've got it on my whiteboard here. And he got injured on the 4th of October. And the word was he would be out for 4 weeks. So that was obviously a porcupine, because Ange's now told us he's actually ahead of schedule. And obviously he's back now, like 6 weeks later. So this is also it's great thing to see. And I'm really excited to see him back. Oh, I can't wait to see him back, hopefully for the first game back after the break. But just noticing that, I think, again, that's just going to sit in the back of my head for remembering how deliberately inaccurate the manager can be on injury updates and whatnot.
Yeah, he likes to throw a wee curveball here and there to people. Another talking point from the game, if we're kind of still looking at it, Haksabanovic, Jota worked really well in the game together. Nice. I think both of those guys looking forward to when we come back. They've not played too much together just due to one's maybe been injured, one's not played in the team and whatever else. Those two guys, I think, when they give Celtic a real different threat that maybe the other guys do, because we know how versatile they are, that they're both guys who can pull up with a trick, they can score a goal. That relates back to Haksabanovic, great strike on Saturday, which I've not really
Lovely.
touched too much on Saturday. I know it's so long ago and we've played the game, but it's a great strike. And it just gives you that versatility. And he's a guy going into this second part of the season that I'm really, really excited about out of anybody. Out the three that Ange said he brought in to peak in the second half, Aaron Moy, Abelgard, and Sead Haksabanovic. He's a guy I'm excited about, and he's on a 5-year deal. I think Haksabanovic is going to be a top player for Celtic, and I think when you see him come back after the World Cup break, you're going to see a different player.
I hope so. I think I think Haksabanovic and Jota firmly are the two best. When we're playing our best team now going forward, if all fit and available, because like you said, they've both got a trick in them. They've both got stardust in their feet, and they've both got that willingness and that ability to take men out the picture and open up space for themselves and for everyone else. And that's been the main frustration watching us attack this year, is the hesitancy or the lack of the ability to do that. Because we walk out of matches on occasion when we don't have both of these guys, or everyone's fit and firing or whatever, and we only actually we scored 2 or 3 goals or whatever it might have been, but we only actually created one more chance than what we scored, that kind of idea. We're not creating, in some cases anyway, buckets of chances and actual shots on target, tons and tons of them, and they're not coming off. It's we get 2 or 3 really good ones and they've not came off, kind of thing. But these guys both have the ability by themselves to manufacture opportunities, which is always going to help a team like us that will face a lot of teams that are just going to bank in. Because if you can't take men out of the picture, then when you're faced with a crowd of people, you need to be pinpoint accurate, and that's quite hard.
And Celtic are very regularly faced with crowds of people. I think that was probably something that impressed people watching Sydney this morning. I was going to say this afternoon there, but it feels weird to say that. But watching Sydney this morning was that they had a go. I know it's a friendly game; it's not competitive, but they had a go, and I think there's far too many teams in Scotland that try and play that negative brand of football, rather than attack the game and try and get something rather than holding on to anything. And Celtic, under Ange Postecoglou, that they're kind of defining Scottish football almost in that, we're defining it in the sense, Quinny, that so many times different Celtic managers, you watch them go up against that banks a 6-4-0 or whatever else, and they just sit in and they don't want to, they're not interested. But we still always find a way. And I was getting frustrated on Saturday because so much of our traffic was going through the middle. You could see it was a game that probably needs stretched that wee bit. But even those both guys can cut inside and they can come up with magic. Haksabanovic does it for the goal. And the first goal initially comes from a fantastic run with Rio Hatate. But we just completely defy anything that's kind of been said previous. And we just, it's a cliche to say it, but we really do never stop. And it's just how we continue to kick on.
Yeah, and most of the chat we've had today is about how deep the squad is, and when your mantra is we never stop, and that's the intensity we want to play at, then it's it's all kind of falling into place for us now. We just need to actually keep this going, because like we spoke about on the podcast before, the first 4 or 5 games of the season, whatever it was, we were untouchable, before we started getting 2 games a week, and then it wasn't necessarily the 2 games a week was the issue, but it just coincided with squad problems, injuries, and whatever else was going on. So we've kind of now regained all that momentum, because the negative stuff with the Champions League, it does, even though if you look domestically, it doesn't look like we've missed a beat, but for the guy, for their own morale and their own, I'm struggling for the word, but yeah, basically their own morale, getting those negative European results does hurt, it's a punch in the chin every week, basically. So getting on a real positive run of, that is what we need to get that flow going again. And yeah, I'm quite excited for everything when we're coming back. McGregor and training today, of course, like you mentioned, and the opposition, Ross County, couldn't play any deeper, and it was quite stereotypical. They were just an absolute caricature of what you expect to see play Celtic. Just sit deep and then just hope for some twist of fate goes in your favour and gives you some sort of glimmer of hope in the match. But I think there's going to be more and more pressure from fans and players to I think that is going to lessen over time, and I think we're already seeing that. There's like a few kind of like usual suspects that will play that type of football, like Malky Mackay and maybe one or two others. But there is some Scottish coaches that are coming through, like into the top flight. Some of them are doing well, some of them have done well and then done crap or whatever. But they are trying to move forward. They want to have a career. They do want to kind of move on, football wise as well, and they want to find players domestically that can do that. So, you know, the manager said it before. I think Pep Guardiola is quite famous for saying that when he plays Brighton, he's really happy because they open up and normally Man City absolutely run over them, kind of thing. But you do want to see other teams open up and play football, because it does only really benefit everyone. Because if the football is more exciting, more people watch it. If more people watch it, guess what? Everyone's a winner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As from a fan's perspective, you want to watch good games. Obviously, you want the 3 points at the end of it, but you'd much rather it's an exciting affair.
Yeah.
That than boring. So yeah, we keep defying that, which is absolutely fantastic. And for our last 10, 15 minutes, you had Quinn about to come on to transfers, because domestic football's now paused for this World Cup, which seems very weird at this point in time to be saying that. I'm sure once the games kick off on Sunday, everybody will be right into it. It just feels strange where it is just now, and you know, not to digress too far away from it, but I just think, this year's kind of felt the most normal since 2019 for us all, and it would have been the perfect time to have a World Cup in the summer, out in the beer gardens or whatever, and really enjoy it. But yeah, here we are in December, it's freezing cold. If you're sitting in a beer garden, you probably get soaked and need to take your thermals and your long johns, so it's not going to be the case, but it is what it is just now, and it's paused, which means that the transfer rumours will ramp up, and we were only 4 days after Celtic's final game, and this comes out with regards to Josip Juranovic, and that the club are bracing themselves for bids for the fullback. Obviously, it would appear that the club, even though he's contracted, I think, until 2020, I want to say 2027 with him. I think he signed a 5-year deal when he came in. It might be 2025. I'll check that when we're talking about this, but he's still got another, at least 3 years, I think, at the club to do.
Sure.
And it looks as if Celtic's maybe sat down and tried to batter out contract with him. I think it's 2025. I'm not even going to check that. I think it's 2025. They've sat down, tried to do a contract with him at the age of 27. For all parties, when they're looking at this, Juranovic will maybe be thinking this will be his chance to get that big money move. But we've heard interest before from the likes of Manchester United and Atletico Madrid. After a World Cup, and if it's a positive World Cup, he's going to start in front of Stanisic, that plays for Bayern Munich. So that already says something about the international manager's belief in Juranovic. It might just be the right time to sell him, and I don't mind that as long as Celtic find an able replacement. But for him, I think he's been absolutely fantastic since he came in, and if he's wanting to go and it's going to benefit us, and we're quite happy to do it, I really don't mind it. Quinny, what's your thoughts on it?
I think it's something to be cautious of for a start, because I don't know how big the market is for Josip Juranovic, to put it bluntly like that, because like if you need a right back, there's a lot of options available, and Atletico Madrid have kind of got themselves sorted now. They actually need a left back more than a right back, and I think Man United are probably actually in a similar position. I think that Malacia has done quite well by all accounts. I might be wrong on that.
No, he has did very well. No,
yeah,
but in terms of United, Wan-Bissaka looks as if he's going to head back to Crystal Palace, and Dalot's been playing majority of the time for United. So I think if Wan-Bissaka goes, they will be looking at a right back. But according to Fabrizio Romano yesterday, they have been scouting Jeremy Frimpong quite often, and that might be the preferred target. And they're saying about 30 million quid for Frimpong, which obviously will benefit Celtic. But it's possible that if they miss out on him, they might have another wee look at Juranovic.
Yeah, because I think watching Juranovic, I think he's very much like top level standard, of course, but I don't think he's as suited to like a million teams in Europe, if that makes sense. Like, there's only some people that would come in from Atletico Madrid, make tons of sense. Man United would have made sense at the time. Maybe there's one or two others, but there's not. Like, I think like Serie A, I think he would do really well actually at a team like Juventus. Potentially, they could do with a new right back, perhaps, and that might be a bit overshooting it. But there's not. Maybe even, I don't know. AC Milan and still playing Calabria at right back. But I don't think like he's not somebody that I don't expect to see like a flood of teams that are desperate for right backs at the moment, because right back is quite a particular position. And like you say, with Frimpong, there is more of a propensity in the European market to get somebody younger. So if there is a younger option, they will almost always be favoured. So Juranovic then needs to overperform expectations at the World Cup to then, like, in my opinion anyway, be valued in the same by these other clubs that might buy him as they would somebody 2 or 3 years younger than him. Because
Like
he
a
needs to be,
Frimpong.
yeah, like a Frimpong. Because at 27 or whatever age he is at the moment,
Yeah,
he
he's
needs to,
27.
he needs to be a sure thing. No one's buying him to develop him. They're buying him to be the number one right back. So mid-level Bundesliga, probably top third La Liga. Really anywhere in Serie A he could end up. But again, those clubs, how much money do they pay for a right back? I don't know if it's anything I would be too buzzing about. It's kind of my ultimate point here. I don't think you're going to get Mönchengladbach paying 45 million for him or something
No,
like that. Or
no,
whatever.
not at all. I mean, the reports, I think, in the summer when this rumour kind of first started, and it's kind of dragged on a bit. What was it? Celtic would be willing to listen to anything above £15 million. So we're kind of in that ballpark figure. I think you'd be looking at something between a 15 and a 20. Which, listen, we paid £2.5 million for him. If you're going to go and spend 6 or 7 of that on another player, fine by me. And possibly develop them again, get 2-3 years out of them, and then move on. But from Celtic's perspective, it's something I think the club will know that they need to learn from in seasons gone by. That maybe when that big money offer comes in for players, you just need to let them go and reinvest it back into your squad. I mean, a guy like Olivier Cham might be an example of that.
He just got in my head.
Other guys that we held on to during 2020, during COVID. When big money moves come in for players, and especially Juranovic's stock for me, Quinny, is never going to be higher because by the time the next Euros roll around, you're another 2 years and he's 29, and the market value is going to decrease on him then. But you're also at the point where you know yourself, January windows, they can be busy, but in terms of permanent moves and whatnot, they're not too frequent, and you don't get too many big kind of wow moments in January recently, just due to the way the market now works. I mean, I remember years ago, I think Andy Carroll and Luis Suarez and all that was January moves. They're the ones I remember. But recently, January's not been a time when a team goes too mental because the team's already set. It's settled usually, and come January, you're maybe looking to add just something. Juranovic might be that player for a team, but due to the market, do you think that will alter because of where the World Cup is? Obviously, if the World Cup was in the summer, your market would be different because you'd have players coming off the back of that. You're in your summer window. But because where the World Cup is, the thing I'm trying to ask you, Quinn, is do you see that the January market overall, to Juranovic out the picture, might alter this year due to where the World Cup is?
Yeah, I think so for sure, because a lot of teams that would normally do their winter break like from the festive period, and there's a lot of nations that don't play football in January, for example. They come back beginning of February, maybe they come back halfway through January. So actually, a lot of those countries are actually coming back like maybe 2 or 3 weeks earlier than what they would have traditionally been. Hence, they're now doing transfer business sooner in their calendar. And then while you're doing your transfer business, it's not like a normal January window where you're just watching whatever Premier League football's on or whatever. They've got the World Cup on, so not only have you get time to, talk to players and clubs and people and whatever goes on in transfers, but any player that's featured in the World Cup, it's like prime shop window material, which is probably why we do expect Juranovic's stock to peak, as we're kind of saying it in air quotes, and the club to take advantage of that. But again, I'm always just I would love to see Juranovic kick on in his career after Celtic, because he has kind of peaked later in life than most footballers do. But again, I just know, because we've seen, because in the summer there was a potential for that high a fee, I'm just personally not as convinced that. Maybe 15 million, 12 million is probably quite achievable. But I think maybe with anyway, I'm not sure. But again, what would we do with that money? It's kind of why I'm playing that down a bit, because it's like, what do you do with 12 million for Celtic really at this point?
Yeah.
Like,
and it then becomes a market that, I think we all have trust in the manager to go and to bring in somebody that would fit in there and do the job. But again, January time, unless you're maybe going to go to the J League or somewhere else again, and bring in somebody who's maybe not too well known about whether the World Cup, Andrew's spoken about Iran previously. I don't know
Yeah.
what the situation is in Iran's team player-wise. I probably would struggle to name you 2 or 3 players from Iran's team. Um, there will be players out there in leagues. It's just about having done your homework. But I have confidence in that. If they've known this was going to happen for a wee while now, whoever they see as a potential replacement is probably already lined up. And if he does go out the door, he'll have somebody in very quick, because there's absolutely not a chance I see Celtic sticking with just one right back for the rest of the season. And it came out this morning that uh, by reports that the 2 positions that Celtic want to buy in January are a right back and a striker. So what's your take on that, Quinn? I suppose they wanted a striker in the summer, but never got one. That might have made a bit of difference to their Champions League campaign, some people would say.
Yeah.
I think he's just wanting to bolster that department. Obviously, you've only got 2 in there. One gets injured, you're left short in terms of rotation and whatever else. And obviously that right back must just indicate that that's a position that we're kind of seeing that we're going to lose probably in January.
I think if we're going to go and get a striker, so I think out of those 2 positions, right, I think we could easily allow Ralston what he's earned for now and let him be number 1 right back, and then we go get a Bernabei mould of a right back behind him. We go and find somebody from the long grass, someone who's 18, 19, breaking through, go pick him up for a couple of million and have a right-sided Bernabei in essence. And then if you do have a couple of quid to go and spend on a striker, then you can really upgrade that and really, if they are the 2 positions, man, like if you can really, and I don't even know where to begin, where Celtic could go to get a striker, but if you really, because
as
again,
long as it's not another West Ham player that nobody doesn't know very well for 5 million quid, don't do that again.
No, I don't think we want, and I don't think we would want another fix them upper, as it were. I don't think we want to take another Ajeti type on where it's, oh, we'll take the chance on you, son, come up the road and we'll help you out. I think we want to try and get back to that stage again of getting an Edward or a Dembele and, somebody who's not making it a big academy that wants a chance, or somebody that is coming through a really small team that not the big dogs haven't caught a whiff of yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think we want to go and make one of those moves, ideally, because that is like what Jota and Haksabanovic gives us in the final third, is that real star power. Giakoumakis and Kyogo are fantastic. I love them both, right? But if that's what the reports are, which I'm not going to, that's all we can talk about is what they're telling us, If there is a striker, that's where you spend the money, man. And that's when it gets exciting, because what type of striker do you go and get at that price?
Well, it's interesting to see because, in recent times, I use Ajeti as that example. Spending money on it won't, just justify a good price tag. So it's a bit of that balance that you're talking about, Quinny, is finding the right type of player in the market and spending a wise amount of money on that player. £9 million in odds in Edward was a good move, good business, good deal,
Yeah.
made your money off it, perfect. For other guys, and again, people say, well, maybe that's too many and whatever else. But if you think back, under Brendan, we had Edward, Dembele and Griffiths in the one team at a time in that 17-18 season. So it's no issue with having 3 strikers in around the building. It's about improving the squad. For me, I still think that I think there's been a standard set in terms of Vickers and Jota and players of that quality, not necessarily £6 million, because I think Hatate probably gets into that category for me at this point in time, even Greg Taylor. But you've got a standard of player that you know what you're going to get and what they are. And I think that Juranovic has been a player that's been in that category for a long time, in terms of performance since he's arrived last summer. But I think if he goes out the door, he'd be looking to, and it's no disrespect to Tony Ralston, but looking to get somebody at that level, that quality of a Jota or a Cameron Carter-Vickers in that team again to just improve it. So I would put right
More
back
money.
as my priority over the striker. But it's exciting because how many January windows in years gone by have we not signed anybody? Are signed just the 2 development players?
Yeah, well, January windows for ourselves have been quite up and down over the years. I think some of them have been, quite disastrous, yeah, to say the least. So yeah, I love the fact that the backroom team, the manager, and everyone involved in it is very forward planning. Kobayashi sounds unofficially all but done. It's just really waiting for that official "it's done" kind of thing by the accounts we're receiving. So yeah, then it's just replace Juranovic, and if you reckon they go and they get another right back of the Juranovic standard, then fair play. But again, what would they want to do this time? Would they want to go and get a Juranovic type that is actually like 25, 26 like we did? Or, I think we are going to try and get somebody younger again,
Yeah, but I'd probably agree with that bit. Quinny, I don't expect us to go and sign somebody probably at that age. Maybe again, and if we do, it needs to be somebody who you knows, in 2 year, 3 years time, you still maybe receive
Recognise.
something back for them. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You know that when you brought in Juranovic from Legia, that Croatian international, there's a good chance here his level of standard's just going to go up that wee bit. He's in
exactly.
the national team all the time. You're probably going to get back something in performance in the Champions League and whatever else is going to develop him. So I'll be interested to see what happens. It's interesting. We've got Everton on Sunday in Sydney Super Cup. I'd imagine Celtic's team to start the game will probably be a bit stronger. I think a lot of those guys that maybe came on in that second half period at first, Jota, Haksabanovic, O'Reilly, Hatate, Taylor will probably start on Sunday. But again, I think it's important that we come to the end of this long batch of games. We're getting minutes into guys who haven't played too often. Quinny,
Yep.
good challenge today against Sydney, even though it was disappointing to lose out. It was frustrating. Play Everton on Sunday, big crowd, give a good account of ourselves, get back, let the players have that wee bit of downtime, and then get over to Portugal and get back to working really, really hard to be prepared for that first game back against Aberdeen.
Yeah, and I think the minutes in the Everton game for some of these players will mean more to them than the minutes against Sydney.
Yeah.
Whether you want to accept that or not, it's just a fact. Tate's never played a Premier League team before. I'm going to say off the top of my head.
No.
I think we played Norwich and he did very well against Norwich. Everyone was loving him against Norwich, if you remember. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't. So I think some of these players will be right up for playing Everton and just challenging themselves. They've done Champions League. They know what that's about. But Premier League, as we know, is seen as the pinnacle of domestic football. So there's a different yardstick there. Some of those guys will probably just kind of be up for that on a personal level.
Yeah, we'll be chatting about that next week when we're on. Thanks to all our usual regular listeners, viewers on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen or watches. Your support's much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel. It's how we bring you free content. And even though we're arriving a bit late to the YouTube game, our subscribers are starting to go up. So thanks to everybody who's already did that. If you've not, please do click subscribe, like the video while you're down there. Quinny, it's a pause. By the time we're on next week, World Cup will be on. We'll be talking about some of our Celts that are there. But as always, thank you for joining me on the Celts Are Here podcast.
Take care.